Hi, I'm Claire, and this is part 2 of my October reading wrap-up. As I mentioned in part 1, I had a really good reading month in October, and I have like 6 more books to talk about in this video, so let's get started. The first thing that I want to talk about in this wrap-up, and the 6th book that I read in October, was Death in the Spotlight by Robin Stevens. This is the 7th book in the Murder Most Unladylike series. These are middle grade historical crime novels and they are delightful. As you might be able to guess from the title, this one takes place in a theatre, which I was so excited about. This is like catnip for me. Daisy and Hazel are in London spending time with some of Daisy's family to just keep them away from all these like murders that keep happening near them, because obviously this is the 7th book in the series. These two girls have found themselves in the vicinity of 6 different murders, so of course their families are trying to keep them out of trouble, but with Daisy and Hazel both being 15 by now, keeping them out of trouble does rather mean like keeping them busy so that they can't find trouble. And a way to keep them busy that the family finds is to volunteer them for bit parts in a play in this theatre. And then of course someone gets murdered in the theatre, and because the murder happened during like a work day, they have logs of who was in and out, who was there to do rehearsals that day, and of course Daisy and Hazel immediately start investigating, even though that's exactly what they were in the theatre to avoid doing. I really enjoyed this book. Again, I really loved the setting. I really appreciated that everything took place in the theatre and we got to kind of bask in that environment. There was a lot of character progression and character growth for both Hazel and Daisy in this book. They talk about things that they've never talked about before. They're getting older, both of them, and Hazel's already had crushes in the previous books, but this is the first time Daisy gets a crush and she is not like ready for it when it hits her, and it's really interesting to see how that affects the mystery and how that affects their friendship and how they start talking about it together. Seeing our two main characters change and grow and learn about themselves and each other and the world around them book after book after book remains one of the great joys of this series for me. It starts when they're 11, they're 15 now, they've dealt with so many murders. We start the series with them as clever, determined little girls, and they are now growing into assured, intelligent, resourceful, skilled young women, and it's really lovely to see. Just a note, because this is a book in a crime series, you probably could read this as a standalone if you wanted to, but I wouldn't recommend doing that because I think it really benefits from having the backbone of the whole series behind it. This is, again, Death in the Spotlight by Robin Stevens. If you want to start the series at the beginning, look for Murder Most Unladylike if you're in the UK, and I believe it was published in the US as Murder is Bad Manners. Next up, I read The Stars Now Unclaimed by Drew Williams. This is a review copy that was sent to me by Tor, and this book is space opera and it has a really cool premise at its core. We are, of course, in a wide galaxy full of really exciting worlds, but some of those worlds have completely lost the use of all technology, while some of them still have masses and masses of technology. This is due to a mysterious event that happened years and years before the start of this book, a phenomenon only known as the pulse. A pulse which went through the entire galaxy, reverberating to every planet, randomly taking out the entirety of the technology of some of those planets, and then only a little bit out of other planets, and then leaving some planets completely untouched. I found it to be a really interesting premise and a really compelling basis for the whole story, which centers on a character called Jane, who is an agent for this sect, the Justified, and her job for the Justified is to go around the galaxy and find gifted children that she might be able to bring back to the Justified to train them up in the use of their gifts and for them to join the Justified and join in the fight against the Pact, a sect that just by chance happened to have almost none of its core worlds touched by the pulse, and so they have all this technology left and no one else around them has the technology, so they have this massive advantage. So they have to be fought off because they only believe in violence, and if you don't fight against them, they will basically subdue you. Like they're basically Cybermen, kind of, but like still people, not tin cans. Anyway, as I'm sure you can tell from this enthusiastic description, I really enjoyed the world building and the premise of the story. And it's not that I didn't like the rest of the story. The characters were fun and compelling. The relationship between Jane and Essa, the gifted girl that she finds in the beginning of this book and that she's bringing back to the Justified, that was lovely. I generally enjoyed a lot of the just character dynamics. At some point I cried about a character that we had only just met because there was some like spaceship based feelings that I'm not gonna go into because spoilers, but feels happened a lot. The only thing that didn't land for me in this book was some of the humor, but the rest of it really worked for me, and I'll definitely be picking up the next book, which I think comes out next year. I've definitely seen a cover for it already on Goodreads, so it can't be that far off. And again, this is The Stars Now Unclaimed by Drew Williams. Next up, I read Saga Volume 8 and Saga Volume 9, written by Brian K. Vaughan, illustrated by Fiona Staples. This is going on hiatus for a year. And the thing that happened at the end of Volume 9 happened at the end of Volume 9, and now they're going on hiatus for a year, and I don't know how I'm gonna deal. So, rewind a little bit first. This is Saga. For those of you who don't know, this is a space opera comic about Marco and Ilana, a couple who everybody on their respective planets basically want dead, because they come from two opposing sides of a never-ending war between their planets. They met when they were soldiers for their respective armies and then promptly fell in love and ran away so that they could have a baby. Now, of course, the governments of their respective planets don't want anybody to know that it's possible to actually like put aside these old differences and not be at war, so they're being hunted down as traitors by both of those governments. This is how it starts, but we are of course 9 books in, so there is way more going on than I can explain right now. There are so many secondary characters that are just amazing, delightful, absolutely terrible in many ways. But I love this series and I love what it does with like how varied the universe is, like how alien some of the aliens look and think, and like how much weird technology and like funny space pets there are. I've been reading this series for a really long time and I enjoy each new book that comes out, but of course some of the middle books haven't been quite as exciting as the first few were when they came out, and it was a real breath of fresh air. So in that same vein, I enjoyed book 8, but it didn't exactly blow my socks off, if you will. This one felt a little bitty, like it was a little bit all over the place, and in fact there is a transition between issues just before the last issue in the book that felt really abrupt. They were somewhere doing something, and then in the next issue, boom, they were on a completely different planet, reunited with some old friends, and you're like, wait, what exactly happened? I had to go back and just double check and see, oh, this is a new issue, this is why it happened. I suppose this is a thing that happens when you read comics in volumes rather than issues. You are missing some of the kind of time scale that is built in. If you're reading as the issues come out, you would get a little bit of time in between those two issues, so when you pick up the new one and they're in a completely different place, maybe it makes more sense. I don't know. It was a bit abrupt in this. I didn't love that transition, but then we get to 9, and in 9 a lot more people are in the same place, which makes it feel less bitty and all over the place. And then there's a massive thing that happens at the end of this book that is kind of like redefining everything. These books in the past have been quite brutal, and this one is quite brutal also. I am not gonna say what happens at the very end, but throughout we are losing some people. Let me just put it that way. I can't wait for more, but I have to wait for more because there's a 1-year hiatus right now, and that makes me sad. Again, that was Saga by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples, and it was brutal. And after that, I needed something that was going to soothe my heart, and that thing was Check Please, Book 1, Hockey by Ngozi Ukazu. Check Please is a webcomic, and as you can see from the cover, it's about hockey and also pies. This is the story of Eric Bittle, nicknamed Bitty, who is a baker and ex-figure skater from Georgia who goes to college up north at Samuel College and gets on the hockey team and meets all of these hockey bros and has cool slice of life university adventures with them in their frat house, because let's be real, even if the house is pretty dilapidated, it does have a kitchen with a working oven. That's better than the student kitchens, and Bitty's gonna make some pie, because that's what he does. So of course I had read this online before and I absolutely loved the story, so I was delighted to hear that it was going to be published as a 2-book deal. So we've got book 1 Hockey, and I'm not sure what book 2 is gonna be called, but this is the first 2 years of Bitty's university career at Samuel. So year 1 and 2 if you've been reading it online, and it also contains all of the extra little comics like Ransom and Holster explaining hockey shit, and also all of the tweets from Bitty. I was especially excited to read an edition of the book where I could have all the tweets at the end. The creator, Ngozi, did a Twitter for Bitty basically where he documents his life and talks about all of the things that are happening in the comic, but then when you're reading the comic it's a little bit difficult to be like reading it and then have a Twitter window open with like his actual Twitter. If you're reading it after the fact, you have to go back so far. It was never really practical enough for me to go and actually do that reading, even though I really wanted to know what the tweets said. So it's cool to have them in a format where it's really easy to go and read them. I don't know if we're going to get more tweets in the second book, which is going to gather years 3 and 4, but I would assume yes, if the tweets are still happening. I don't actually know what's going on with Bitty's Twitter account right now, but I'm going to assume in any case that there's going to be extra material, because there was a lot of extra material in this book. It's been packaged beautifully, so I'm very excited for when I can buy the second book and have it on my shelf, and it's going to look adorable and I'm going to keep looking at it all the time because it makes me so happy. Again, this is Check Please by Ngozi Ukazu, and if you want to check out this one, just Google Check Please and you will find it, and you can read it for free and become completely addicted like I was. And finally in October I read Toil and Trouble, 15 Tales of Women and Witchcraft, an anthology edited by Tess Sharp and Jessica Spotswood. And I absolutely loved this one. I know a lot of people read this anthology in October because it is spooky and about witches and it's Halloween time, and I have heard some really mixed reactions about it, which I was completely baffled by. Out of this whole anthology there was only one story that I finished and went like, huh, I didn't really like where that went and what that did. There were a few that I was a bit meh about, less excited, not necessarily disliking it, but not really getting that fired up about what it was that they were doing or saying, but most of them I really enjoyed. There were so many stories in there that I finished and I thought that was amazing. I'd have a novel in this world. I want more about these characters. I want more about this particular brand of witchcraft. I want to go and read through the entire table of contents of this anthology and like just go and buy books from every single one of those writers bar 1 or 2. I was genuinely delighted with this anthology, and it actually took me the entire month to listen to the audiobook because I really liked getting 1 or 2 stories here and there and just having more of them to listen to before it was finished. Some of the stories were really endearing and heartwarming, some of them were just devastating. There was a lot about women in witchcraft and the way that these two things intersect in terms of being persecuted, both because you're a woman and you're a bit different or because you're a witch. There was a lot of queer love stories in the anthology as well, which I really appreciated. There was just a lot of women recovering and finding their strength and having a strength that is not necessarily, you know, the first thing you think about when you think of strength. There was a lot about sisterhood and about coming together and helping each other and supporting each other, and you know, it was just really, really beautiful. And again, that was Toil and Trouble, 15 Tales of Women and Witchcraft, edited by Jessica Spotswood and Tess Sharp. And that was my October reading. I hope I can edit it into something a bit more manageable than the recording experience was this evening, because I've had a few hurdles to jump. If you're wondering why my makeup changed in between videos, it's because I overran so much I had to stop for dinner, and now it's gone midnight, so I'm gonna go and take this off and have a pudding and watch some YouTube videos before bed. If you'd like to see more from me, you can check out a previous video on screen right now. And if you haven't yet, please hit the subscribe button that's on my face for a new video from me every week. I've been Claire, thanks so much for watching, and see you soon.